And welcome everybody to Apocrypha Apocalypse. I am Gary Machuda, and we are having yet another chill stream today. Actually, today we are packed with information. We are going to do not one but two passages, and both of them are very interesting stuff. Again, we're working through the Gospel of Luke. In fact, we might be coming up to the end of the Gospel of Luke, and hopefully, if I can get through the material, I'll show you some very interesting insights. One, not so important, although very fascinating. And the other is, uh, I think, very intriguing. Very intriguing. I know. Why am I talking so obscurely? Well, because it's a chill stream. My brain hasn't woke up. So, welcome aboard, everybody. Good to see you. Yes. God bless you. Reason Belief. By the way, guys, Reason Belief has some really good stuff on his channel. Support him. Go to Reason Belief, subscribe, like, hit the bell. Really, really good stuff. So good morning, all. Seeing lots of familiar names in the chat. Let's see, what's this say here? Just finished this stream on Gary and David's response to Gavin Orland. Oh, cool. I hope you enjoyed it. We have two parts, so I don't know which part you watched. Hopefully you watched both of them. David and I, of course, William is out on assignment. That is, he's on vacation with his family, out of country actually. And because he doesn't have good internet access, he couldn't do the team streams with us to do this response. So there's actually a third part. Hopefully we can get William to do it, because what we did was there was just so much to unpack and critique in that Gavin Ortland panel discussion on the Old Testament canon. We divided it into chapters and we chose chapters for ourselves. And so David and I, in parts 1 and 2, did some of the later chapters. And the earlier chapters, William picked, but we just couldn't get our act together before William went on vacation. So I think he'll be back in the States during the weekend. So we'll see. We might actually have a part 3. And that would largely cover the philosophical difficulties of the canon and sola scriptura, which is really William Albrecht's sweet spot in many ways. Let's see. Second part, finish the first part, same day streamed. Awesome. Thank you for doing that. I'm humbled that you deign to watch any of our videos, to tell you the truth. Not because of David or William's material, because of mine. Learned a lot of stuff in our team stream yesterday. If anybody was able to see that, found out that David Zavaris' last name means dry, but that doesn't really fit him. I mean, he goes through a lot of dry material, but he does so a very fascinating way, in my personal opinion. So said he'd be back on the 14th. Today's the 10th. Okay, maybe I misunderstood him. Maybe he said he would be in internet connection range Saturday or Sunday. So, yeah, okay, good. We miss him here. He misses us terribly as well. William is the guy that gets us all thrilled and pumped to do apologetics. And he's just an amazing guy. He's a machine. He just goes on and on and on. Yes, so let's see here. Let's talk about today's program. By the way, I want to encourage all of you who are watching this, maybe not live, but on recording. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Like, hit the bell, tell your friends. Of course, this isn't queued up correctly. Here we go. And also got memberships. We appreciate your support if you'd like to support us financially. And also, Will Albrecht and myself are on Patreon. Again, you get freebies and stuff. It is a thank you for supporting our ministry and enabling us to do all this research. So today we're going to look at Luke 9:31 and its connection with Wisdom 3:3. This one is not one of those explosive connections, something that shows, wow, Luke or Jesus believed wisdom is inspired scripture, but nevertheless, it is an interesting contact in the New Testament. Certainly puts to lie the claim that the New Testament doesn't use Deuterocanonical books. A more formidable connection that we're going to explore, God willing, today is Luke 12:20, and its multiple connections with Sirach 11:18-26. And by the way, this is not going to be not just that text. We're also going to do a bonus text that connects with it from Wisdom. And I'm going to give you yet another bonus connection with Tobit. And this deals with the parable of the rich man in Luke 12. So we got a lot in store for us today. So good morning or good evening. Welcome aboard, all of you around the world. Yeah, alternate universe, William played the Terminator. You know, there might be something behind that, because when David and William debated T-Fan and Dan Chapa, that debate was super long. And if you watch the debate, you'll see something truly remarkable. Late in the debate, William comes up, and it's almost like he just started. He's fresh, he's crisp, he's thrilled and pumped. Same thing with David, true. Also, and we were doing the watch party here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse, and tell you the truth, like about halfway through, I was dead tired. I wasn't even participating in the debate. So he is like the Terminator. He just keeps going and going and going. So yeah, in the alternative universe, William would be the Terminator. Um, I'm waiting for the Matthew and Wisdom 2 slides on Patreon. I didn't upload those? Boy, thank you for telling me, James. I will, God willing, I will put them up right after the chill stream. How about that? I could have swore I put that up there. Boy, my mind. Thank you for telling me. I am spoiling you. You're right. Yeah, I just hope we can make sense. Actually, I added the Tobit part right before the stream. So I didn't get a chance to thoroughly research it as I should. Okay. So why don't we begin? Because we got a lot to do today. I originally was just going to do this, but I don't think this is enough to fill a chill stream, or it'd be really short. And I was looking forward to talking to you guys this morning, so I added the other part. In fact, let me do the whole screen at once. There we go. This is what we're talking about today. One of many things, Luke 9:31 and its connection with Wisdom 3:3. By the way, if you have any questions, you could put it up there in the chat. I don't know if I'm going to have anybody backstage, just because we have so much material. I don't know if I have time for a discussion. Okay, so here it is. Luke 9:31. Let me give you the background. I should have actually expanded this a bit so you can get the full context of these passages. This is Luke 9 is the Mount of Transfiguration. Remember, Peter, James, and John and Jesus ascend the mountain, and on the mountain, Jesus is filled with glory. He is transfigured before them. Moses, Elijah come, and he discusses things with Moses and Elijah, and then they disappear, right? And this is the transfiguration is actually one of those pivotal moments in the gospel. It's mentioned elsewhere in the New Testament. That's how important it is. It's where Christ's divinity is manifested in his humanity. There's lots of all sorts of important connections in the transfiguration. And what we're going to focus today is about what Jesus was discussing with Moses and Elijah. It says, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus. And the Greek there is tin exodon, that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. So what were they talking about? They were talking about his exodus that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. What's the exodus that he's going to accomplish in Jerusalem, right? When we hear exodus, we think of the Exodus, where Moses and the Israelites escaped from Egypt, right? But where does Jesus escape from Jerusalem? It's a very odd way of expressing this, right? Very puzzling. So why the word exodon or exodus? Well, it could refer to the actual exodus, that there's going to be some sort of an analogy to the freedom that the sons of God achieved from the land of Egypt. But the word exodon in the Deuterocanonical books, in Wisdom 3:2 and 7:6, is used for death. Okay. So for example, in Wisdom 3:2, it says, they seemed in view of the foolish to be dead, and their passing away, Exodus, was thought an affliction. So here, the death of the righteous is described as their exodus, kind of like the exodus from life, earthly life. You also see the same kind of usage in Wisdom 7:6. For all men have one entrance into life, and the like going out. In other words, their death is described as exodus, going out. So this kind of makes a double entendre for Jesus discussing with Moses and Elijah his exodus, right? Because there is a link to Jesus being the new Moses, issuing a new exodus. And there's also just the word exodus is that he's speaking about his death. So that would actually be the literal meaning of the word. And you see this connection in wisdom. Now, like I said, this isn't one of those mind-blowing, revelations of thought, but it is pretty cool though. So let's go to the lexicons. Here's Little and Scott lexicon for the word exodus. One of the meanings of exodus given is the end or close or departure and death. And all I want to point out here is that this lexicon gives us references to Wisdom 3:2, Luke 9:31, also 2 Peter 1:15, and I'm not sure what this is, to tell you the truth. It's probably pagan writing because it just doesn't look familiar to me. But in terms of Old Testament, the only connection they have is Wisdom 2:3 and to Luke 9:31 and 2 Peter 1:15. Now, this is the Exegetical Dictionary of the New Testament. And in the New Testament, Exodus occurs 3 times. The earliest times in Hebrew 11:22, which refers to Genesis 50:24, where Joseph predicted before his death that God would lead the children of Israel into the land of promise. For this event, the Exodus from Egypt, Exodus, is already in the Septuagint. Okay, so basically, it refers to the Exodus. Then notice part B. It says in Luke 9:31 and 2 Peter 1:15, Exodus is used to mean departure from life equal death. This meaning is found also in Hellenistic literature, so it's used elsewhere, like Josephus and Antiquities of the Jews. And then you have Wisdom 3:2, 7:6, Philo, and Testimony of Naphtali, I think it is. And also in pagan writings and Christian writings. So don't let that part throw you off. Basically, it's just saying that you see this usage for death in many different places. You find it in the New Testament, 2 passages. And it says in Hellenistic literature, so the exegetical dictionary thinks of the Deuterocanon is Hellenistic Jewish literature. So Josephus, who lived uh, during the time of Christ but wrote around 100 AD, uses the word in this way. Philo is a contemporary of Jesus, but they had no contact between each other. He uses Exodus and for death. But there's 2 points of contact in wisdom, 3:2 and 7:6. And testimony most likely, I believe the testimony of the 12 patriarchs is generally thought to have been written in the 1st century, maybe BC or AD. Okay. But I think it would unlikely be the background for Jesus' use of the word Exodus, or Luke's description, I should say, of Jesus' discussion. Here's another one. This is a standard Protestant lexicon, Greek English lexicon, New Testament. As you can see, first it means Exodus, like the literal Exodus. Then euphemistically, departure, death. And then we have the 2 citations for wisdom, Philo, Josephus, Testament, Naphtali, and so on. And 2 Peter 1:15. And so, like I said, not mind-blowing, but it's very interesting. So what do we have here? We kind of have a conflation of the word Exodus used to describe death during the time of Jesus. So we know that this type of use of the word Exodus was prevalent in the 1st century, or somewhat prevalent. At least 2 sources use it that way. But in terms of the Greek Old Testament, it only appears as a euphemism for death in the Book of Wisdom. So if Luke is trying to evoke the Old Testament Septuagint by using this word in this way, it could only come from wisdom. Okay. Likewise, the use of departure from the location or the Exodus, that's the other ways it's used. Now, what's interesting too is when you take wisdom into account, if you're just reading the New Testament in light of the Septuagint, you see that there's this beautiful double entendre going on with Luke, that he's connecting Jesus with Moses and the Exodus. After all, who is there with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration? Well, Moses and Elijah. Now, you guys, if you put your Bible thinking caps on, you remember that both of those are connected, because both Moses and Elijah made a journey to meet God on Mount Horeb. Moses did it during the Exodus, and Elijah did it when he was fleeing from, I can't think of the name, but basically the prophets were being slain. He flees to see God on Mount Horeb, the same mountain. So it's not by coincidence, guys, that at the Mount of Transfiguration, it's Moses and Elijah that appear with Jesus on the top of the mountain. Because who appeared to Moses on the top of the mountain? Is anybody awake? God appeared to Moses on the top of the mountain, right? Yeah. And when Elijah journeyed to Mount Horeb and he went to meet God, who did he meet? You meet God, right? So who is Moses and Elijah meeting on the top of the Mount of Transfiguration? God, right? Except who are they talking to? They're talking to Jesus. So Transfiguration really does show that Jesus is the God that talked to Moses and talked to Elijah in the Old Testament. And the fact that Luke speaks of Jesus as talking about his exodus he's going to accomplish in Jerusalem further cements this idea that Jesus is there. He's a new Moses, conferring with these 2 important figures. Often it's said Moses symbolizes the law, Elijah symbolizes the prophets. So you actually have the law and the prophets there. Yeah, possibly, but the better connection is that in both figures, journeyed to Mount Horeb, the same place as Transfiguration, to meet God, and both are there at the Transfiguration. And Jesus' divinity is made manifest to the apostles. So very, very powerful proof for the divinity of Christ. So when Luke wants to summarize their discussion, it's interesting that he pulls the word Exodus out. But in order for this to make sense, Exodus has to refer to Jesus' death. But where in the Old Testament do you find Exodon being used to describe death? The Book of Wisdom, which talks about the righteous soul's death. Remember, this is Wisdom 3, of course, follows Wisdom 2, which talks about the just one. And we went over that in detail. So he's using wisdom to have this double entendre. And there's another cool wrinkle here, just to throw it out, in case you never thought about it. Where did Moses and the Israelites, what was their exodus from? Where did the exodus start? What were they fleeing from? Yes, that's true, Johnny F. Awesome. Right. Very good. Yeah, they fled from Egypt, from slavery in Egypt, right? Where is Jesus's exodus going to come from? It's going to come from Egypt? Out of Egypt I called my son? No, it's going to come from Jerusalem. He's going to accomplish his exodus in Jerusalem, which is a pretty dark way of describing Jerusalem, because Jerusalem, in this, if you're applying this word in this way, is really Egypt. And the exodus is going to be from Jerusalem. So interesting stuff, right? Very interesting stuff. So, like I said, this one's not as formidable as context. Those are the commentaries. The Cambridge Paragraph Bible 1873 has a cross-reference from Luke 9 to the Greek in Wisdom 3:22. So the Paragraph Bible recognizes this use of exodon. Jesus did have an exodus. Yes, from Egypt. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, so this isn't the only place. Oh, yeah, I do have commentaries. I'm sorry. I have my slides mixed up here. Yes, very good. That's where you got Fisher's Men from. Yes. Thank you, Johnny. Yeah, well, I would love to unpack the Transfiguration, but we have a lot to do, and we're focusing on deuterocanonical contexts. So there's the Transfiguration is packed with meaning. So I'd recommend, my go-to source always is Sam Shamoon does some really in-depth unpacking. I'm sure he's done it with the Transfiguration since it's so important to establish Christ's divinity. I'm sure Sam has done something on that. Okay, so let's go to Protestant commentaries. This is the Gospel of Luke commentary, the New International Greek New Testament commentary, generally a pretty good one. It says, it is Jesus's exodus, literally departure. The word is used for departure par excellence. The exodus from Egypt in Hebrews 11:22, and euphemistically of death in Wisdom 2:3-2, 7:6, and 2 Peter 1:15. Significantly in this context is allusion to the Transfiguration. So it's purposely it's riffing and connecting these different dots, right? The literal exodus and death. And of course, that's how we're free from slavery, from death and sin, right? In a way, the earth, the fallen world, is our Egypt, where we're in slavery to sin and death, right? And ultimately, it's through Christ's death and resurrection and our eventual resurrection that we perform our exodus, that we escape from the world's slavery and death into our freedom as the sons of God. Also, word biblical commentary. It says, quote, all figures of the heavenly court have glory. Exodus departure is used in Jewish Greek of death. Departure from life, wisdom 3:2, 7:6, but always with contextual clarification. So again, they make the lexical connection there with the word. And speaking of word, this is not the word biblical commentary. This is was it Tyndale New Testament commentary? Sorry about that error there. Yes, it's correctly cited, but the header is wrong. The use of the word Exodus for death is unusual, and we should probably discern some Exodus typology. So I just put this in there just because they note that Luke is using a very unusual way to describe Jesus' passion and death by using this word Exodus, but this particular commentary doesn't make the connection with wisdom. Critical Exegetical Handbook to the Gospel of Matthew and Luke. And it says, his departure, namely from this life and work on the earth, through his death, resurrection, and ascension. Then it gives Josephus' Antiquities. Compare Wisdom 3:2, 7:6, 2 Peter 1:15, and the passages of I don't know who this is. Yeah, so that must be a secondary scholarly sources there. So basically, it's just saying the word is used in this way by Josephus, and then compare Wisdom 3:2, 7:6, 2 Peter 1:15, so on. Commentary on the New Testament use of the Old Testament by Beale and Carson. It says Dobble has highlighted the significance of Wisdom 3:1-3 in this discussion. In its reference to the death and vindication of the righteous individual in the context where historical paradigm of the Exodus event best illustrates God's role in such acts of vindication. Wisdom 8-19. This double reference in Wisdom 3:1-3 may also be present in Luke's transfiguration narrative, where the fundamental event of Israel is connected to the life of an individual. So this is actually a very good comment here, because it does highlight the fact that wisdom's talking about this individual. And actually, when you get to chapter 3, it starts talking about all the righteous. But nevertheless, you have this very interesting connection between wisdom and Luke's use in the Transfiguration, with this very unusual word, right? Very unusual word. Okay, so that is our first one. And by the way, if you're new to the stream, guys, or you're watching this later on, please, if you like it, give a thumbs up, leave some comments, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Love to have you on board. We have a whole bunch of really awesome people that follow the live streams. And if you're reading the comment section, you know they're very well educated. These guys have superior biblical knowledge. I can just tell by the comments you're making. So, which helps me, because it helps me with my presentation. So now we're going to go to the entree of it. That was an appetizer. Let's go to the entree of this chill stream today. And that is Luke 12:20 and its connection with Sirach 11:18-26. Okay. Now this is Jesus's parable of the rich man. So let me read this just to give you guys context. Okay. Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, what shall I do? For I do not have space to store up my harvest. And he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods, And I shall say to myself, now for you, you have so many good things stored up for your many, many years. Rest, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus it will be for the one who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich in what matters to God. Okay, beautiful parable, nice and short, lots of interesting features. We can pull it apart, talk about it. I'd love to do that, but we got a lot to do because, like I said, you're going to get not just Sirach, but you're also getting other goodies as well in this chill stream. Okay, so what is the connection with Sirach? Well, let's read Sirach. So this is Sirach 11, verses 18 through 26. Now, open your ears and see if you can hear some familiar things in Sirach after hearing Jesus' parable. Okay, verse 18 begins, quote, a man may become rich through a miserly life, and this is his allotted reward. When he says, I have found rest, now I'll feast on my possessions. He does not know how long it will be till he dies and leaves them to others. My son, hold fast to your duty, busy yourself with it. Grow old while doing your task. Admire not the sinner's life, but trust in the Lord and wait for his light. For it is easy with the Lord suddenly, in an instant, to make a poor man rich. God's blessing is a lot of the just man, and in due time his hopes bear fruit. Say not, what do I need? What further pleasure can be mine? Say not, I am independent. What harm can come to me now? In the day of prosperity, makes one forget adversity. The day of adversity makes one forget prosperity. For it is easy with the Lord on the day of death to repay man according to his deeds. So you see some, or you hear some echoes, right? Some interesting echoes with Jesus's parable with the rich man. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what exactly are the points of contact between Jesus's parable and the Deuterocanonical book of Sirach? Well, I'm glad you asked because that's what I have in my slides. Oh, I thought I go into depth. Yes. There's also, yeah. Now here's the second text. I'm sorry, I forgot how I structured this. So you have Sirach, and we're going to unpack that. But there's also a point of connection between Luke 12:20 and Wisdom 15:8. Okay, so there we go. Now, when Jesus says in Luke 12:20, God said to the rich man, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. Look at the bottom of the screen, Wisdom 15:8. Now, the context is different, but the idea of a life being given as a loan that will be demanded back is used that way in Wisdom 15:8. So Wisdom 15:8, the context is different, but the idea of the life being on loan and paid back to God is there. Okay. And we'll read it. So it says, Wisdom 15:8 says, and with misspent toil he molds the meaningless God from the self same clay, though he himself shortly before was made from the earth, and after a little is to whence he was taken, when the life that was lent him is demanded back. So you see this idea of life being lent to God, from God to man, will be demanded back. The same thought as Jesus. Okay, so that's also in the mix as well. So let's unpack the connections. First connection is both Sirach 11 and Luke 12 deal with the rich man. That's the first obvious connection. The difference, though, is In contrast, in Sirach 11:18, the man becomes rich, where Jesus starts with him already being rich. So Jesus kind of truncates it a little bit in a way. Now, there are all sorts of lexical contexts. Now, when I say lexical, all I mean is in Greek, in the original Greek, they use the same words, maybe different forms, but the same words. Now, it's sometimes hard to see in English because unless you have a really good super literal translation of scripture, you probably wouldn't pick up on these. So let's go through here. And to help you, for those who don't know Greek, I color coded it for you. So when the same Greek word is present in one passage, I put in blue, for example, and then in the other passage, I put in blue. So you know the same word is being used. Now look at this cluster of lexical context here. For example, the rich man shall say to myself, now as for you, you have so many good things. The Greek word there is hagatha, basically just good, right? Many good things. What's interesting in Sirach 11, where it says, now I will feast on my possessions. The English word possessions actually is not a great translation. It literally means of my goods in Greek. So it's the plural for good. The same Greek word, but plural. Ton, agathon, mu. Okay. So that's one lexical connection, that the possessions are described as good or goods. All right, Byzantine finest. Thank you. Yeah. I've gone back to being monochromatic because James hasn't been to the chill streams in a while. And, I got to add a little bit of color, but maybe if he comes back, I'll make him more colorful. Okay, so that's the first one. It's kind of odd that one's possession is described as good or goods. Then it says, store up for many years, rest, eat, drink, and be merry. The word rest is also found in Sirach 11:19, as you can see. It's color-coded in yellow. And it's interesting that the rich man in Sirach 11 says, when he says, I have found rest, right? The word rest is the same as Jesus. So you have another lexical connection. A third lexical connection is the word eat. In Greek, it's phage. Okay. Again, what we find is a lexical connection with Sirach 11:19, because the rich man says basically to himself, I have found rest. Now I will feast on my possessions. Literally, he will eat his possessions. Okay. The same word, phage, phago, phagomai. It's all used, different forms, same word. So in both the parable of Jesus and Sirach, possessions are called good. They both have rest, claim to have rest, and both rich men eat. They want to eat their possessions. Of course, Jesus has drink and be merry, right? So you have this string of important terms being shared in both passages in a very tight cluster. And then just for good measure, I also added in green the connection with wisdom. So starting in verse 19 and 20, you have this tight collection of lexical connections. That's very interesting, and it points towards dependency, right? And again, we have this parallel here with wisdom as well. God will say to him, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And you also have in Wisdom 15:8, the life that was lent him is demanded back. And you have life, it's actually the word psyche, right, in Greek, psyches, and demanded back, different form, but basically the same expression. Yeah. Yeah, good. I'm glad they do. That's what I do. Try to make it easy for you, breaking it down for everybody. Interesting stuff, guys. I hope so. So let's list all the different connections. Okay, so you have the contrast, Sirach 11, the man becomes rich. Well, Jesus starts with him being rich. So you kind of have an idea. This actually gives some light into Jesus's parable that the rich man, through miserly things, not spending money on other things, he saves his money, he gets rich. The rich man in both passages inquires of himself, and that is really interesting, right? Both Jesus's parable of the rich man and Sirach, the rich man and Sirach, are both talking to themselves. They're inquiring of themselves certain things. So even that kind of expression of retelling the story is shared both by Sirach and Jesus. And that's probably as strong as a lexical connection because you don't normally have in biblical literature, you normally don't have people, uh, thoughts, people thinking to themselves certain things. It is there, right? Like, for example, off the top of my head, like Balaam thinks to himself certain things, right? But it's not very common. And it's interesting that both Sirach and Jesus, with all these connections, the rich character is thinking to himself certain things. He's self-reflecting. The rich man in both passages believes that because he has many possessions, he has found rest, and it uses the same Greek word. The consumables are both described as good things, hagia, hagiathon, um, which is also unusual, but it's a lexical connection. The rich man eats the good things in both Jesus's parable and Sirach. Both men feast is abruptly ended by death. Okay. Both mention that the man's possessions will be given to others. That's something I didn't really highlight. Um, Both Jesus and Sirach notes that basically when you die, whatever you saved up goes to other people, which is a very important point for both passages, right? Because after all, why are you storing up riches in this life and not giving to the poor? It's not like you're going to take it with you. They're yours only temporarily, and they're going to end up being other people's possessions anyway. So the thought is, why not give to the poor, right? It makes sense, right? It logically leads up to that conclusion. Let's see. Both Luke 12:20 and Wisdom 15:8 both speak of the soul as the ego. That's another interesting thing too. Notice that, you know, the word life, psyche, used by Jesus and Wisdom 15:8 is the soul is where the personhood resides, the I, the ego. Hebrew literature is usually pretty vague on that, but both for Luke and Wisdom, they make that same connection. Both have God demanding back one's soul. I'll give you the Greek, same Greek words, essentially. And the point of both is the same, that the just man will be repaid at death for his good deeds that will be stored up in heaven, right? So, multiple thematic connections, multiple lexical connections, and it also fills up a little bit of each other. They're kind of like mutually supportive. The details that are given in one section, and like from Jesus, it gives some additional light to Sirach, and Sirach gives a little bit additional light to Jesus. So I think beyond a doubt, Jesus is riffing off of Sirach 11, probably also drawing material in from Wisdom 15:8. Do you guys agree with me? If you do, or don't, put it in the chat room. Love to hear from you. Now, Since you survived the boredom and you've stayed awake this long in a chill stream at this ungodly hour, or I should say godly hour, I'm going to give you a third one. And guys, I'm going to have to apologize because it was literally like an hour ago. I was going through this material, double checking my slides, which obviously I still missed a couple of errors that needed to be corrected. And it occurred to me that there is yet another deuterocanonical contact here in Luke. So I didn't get a chance to check cross references or even commentaries, but I wanted to throw it out there just as a reward for you guys for watching this. Yeah, that's true. Luke, yeah, Jesus in Luke and Luke himself definitely draw from the Deuterocanon in some important ways, right? So I want to throw this in there. There's also contact between Luke 12:21 and Tobit 4:9 and 12:8. And the reason why this occurred to me is because we did a chill stream, a couple of weeks ago, when we're going through Matthew, and we went through Tobit 4:9 and 12:8. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a different context, though. It wasn't about the parable of the rich man. It was Matthew 6 with prayer, almsgiving. Remember that? And storing up treasures. Well, hopefully, if you don't remember, this will help you remember. Jesus says in 19 and 21, so I skipped 20 here just to save space because there's another connection here. Okay, so 19, the rich man says, I shall say to myself, now as for you, you have many good things, right? Remember we talked about agathon, good things, possessions, stored up for many years, rest, eat, drink, and be merry. And then Jesus in verse 21 says, thus it will be for the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich in what matters to God. And verse 20 is a really important summary of the whole point of the parable of the rich man, right? Thus it will be. Basically, he will lose everything he stored up. It'll be given to others. And his life will be demanded back. So thus it will be for the one who stores up treasure for himself, but not rich in what matters to God. In other words, there is something that we should be storing up in this life for ourselves, not earthly goods, but heavenly goods, things that matter to God. That's what we should be storing up, right? Now, immediately when I read that, the light bulb figuratively went off in my brain, and I thought back to our chill stream on Matthew 6, because this is precisely what Jesus was teaching Matthew 6, which was also riffing off of Tobit, right? So I went back, and the two pertinent passages in Tobit, sure enough, you see all sorts of lexical connections between the two. Why? Because it's basically the same thought, the same lesson. Okay, first, let's read Tobit 4:8 through 10, because that's really where most of the connections are, though there's a little bit in Tobit 12. Son, give alms in proportion to what you own. Now, notice we're talking about earthly goods, heavenly goods, that type of thing right away. For if you have great wealth, give alms out of your abundance. And if you have little, distribute even some of that. But do not hesitate to give alms. You will be storing up a goodly treasure for yourself against the day of adversity. Almsgiving frees one from death and keeps one from going into the dark abode. And then you have the second passage in Tobit 12:8-9. Prayer and fasting is good, but better than either is almsgiving accompanied by righteousness. Remember, we talked about how Jesus actually expounds on this in Matthew 6. A little with righteousness is better than abundance with wickedness. It is better to give alms than to store up gold. For almsgiving saves one from death and expiates every sin. Those who regularly give alms will enjoy a full life. Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Byzantine's finest. Totally agree with you. So much deuterocanonical meat. You're right. Yeah, this is going to be a pretty hearty breakfast for those who are just waking up, or maybe a night snack for those who are in evening time. Yeah, there is a lot here. Now let's break down the lexical stuff, shall we? Okay. Jesus says, "Now and for you, you have so many good things." Again, agatha is used, and it's also used in Tobit 8, 8 through 10, where he says, "Do not hesitate to give alms. You'll be storing up a goodly treasure." Agathon is used, the same Greek word. So treasure, goods, you have a lexical connection there. Okay. Then in verse 21, Jesus says, "Thus it will be for one who stores up treasure for himself." Now, store up is used both in Tobit 4 and in Tobit 12, right? And the whole idea of Tobit is don't store up treasure, earthly treasure like gold, store up heavenly treasure like almsgiving, right? So the same word store up is used, or store up treasure is used. Now, another connection too, which I found really interesting, is not only the idea of storing up treasure for yourself is also found both in Tobit and Jesus, which I think is indicative of dependency. Okay. I think it's indicative of dependency. Now, what do I mean by that? Because, yeah, you could say, I mean, these are pretty similar words: good, treasure, store up. Yeah, they just could randomly just be used because they're very common, right? But to store up treasure for yourself makes the odds of there being, it heightens the odds, let's put it that way, that it isn't just serendipitous. It isn't just by chance. There's common words that are being used here, because the odds of using good in both passages are pretty high. The odds of using good and treasure together makes it a little bit more of a long shot, but good treasure for yourself altogether, again, it makes it less and less likely this is serendipitous, that it just happened by chance. It seems to be happening on purpose. Now, the only difference is Jesus, because he's talking about the rich man in the parable, says that he's going to, the one who stores up treasure for himself, where in Tobit, because he's instructing his son, he says that store up a goodly treasure for yourself. But it's the same kind of self-reflective pronoun being used, right? Himself, yourself, same thing, right? And what are you going to do it? It's for against the day of adversity. But the very next line makes it clear that the day of adversity he isn't talking about earthly adversity. He's talking about judgment, right? Almsgiving frees one from death and keeps one from going into dark abode. And then in 12, you have the same thing about forgiving sins. Almsgiving saves one from death and expiates every sin. So it has an eschatological aspect to it. It points to the end of one's life. Yeah, when I saw this before the chill stream, guys, I thought, hold on a second, I got to make these slides really quick and show you. But unfortunately, I got the slides done, but I didn't have enough time to do an in-depth analysis of this, because I'm really curious if there was any old Protestant Bibles that saw this connection, because this seems pretty significant to me. And, it's so helpful too, because it shows how, in terms of Jesus's moral teaching, especially when he's talking about the afterlife and storing up treasure and that type of stuff, how important Tobit was for him. If you look at our chill stream when we do Matthew 6 and Tobit, you'll understand what I mean, right? It's like this is an important uh, point of teaching for Jesus, and there's every indication that he's using Tobit as the basis for that teaching. And so for me, that gives us pretty forceful evidence that Jesus accepted Tobit as an authoritative scripture, as inspired, right? And I think in light of everything else that we showed in this particular chill stream regarding Luke 12, I don't see how you can say that there isn't that purposeful connection. So there's also a thematic connection. Jesus is teaching one should store up treasure in what matters to God, where Tobit teaches that you should store up a goodly treasure of almsgiving, which of course is pleasing to God. It's the same thought, same thought. Only Tobit focuses on alms, but Jesus focuses on whatever good works are pleasing to God. And both of them speak of preparing a treasure for the day of death, right? So, I mean, it's the connection there, I think, is obvious. That's why I want to go and I want to look for cross references, because something this obvious has to have been picked up by some Protestant somewhere. So I don't know if I'll be able to do that by next chill stream, but if I do, I'll try to get that together for you guys. Yes. That Lagoria Militant says, I'm just amazed at why Tobit was rejected so badly by Protestants. It's actually quite beautiful. Yes, it is, except for its doctrine. That's what made it odious to Protestants. This idea that good works like almsgiving can forgive sins, that you store up treasure in heaven. And so there's this idea of merit, in Tobit. They didn't like that. And that's the reason why they kind of turned their nose down on Tobit, because it was works-based, supposedly. But as you can tell, Jesus has no problem with it. He has no problem. In fact, he focuses on, he's not riffing off parts of Tobit that deals with the marriage or anything like that. No, he's riffing off the whole idea of storing up treasure in heaven, the very things that the reformers didn't like. And that's not just my opinion, guys. There is a quote that I like from Bruce M. Metzger. In his introduction to the Apocrypha, he says that Luther was first led to disparage the so-called Apocrypha because of his teachings on merit, and he cites Tobit along with some other things as well. Okay, so James Day says, clearly these are all later editions, Gary. Yes. Now, James, I assumed that was tongue-in-cheek, right? Are you referring to some commentators that say this must be a Christian addition to the Deuterocanon because it sounds too much like Jesus? Or yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I know. I'm going to look. I'm going to see what I can find. Maybe I'll find somebody who says something like that. Yeah, that's true. So Byzantine Finance says, it seems like many people reject info first rather than inquire about the info. It's backwards thinking. You're actually right. Yeah, people already have their preconceived ideas of canon, and then they kind of project that back on the text. And that's why they refuse to admit that the New Testament's filled with deuterocanonical references. You're absolutely right. It's backwards. And then, which is fine, right? I have no problem if you assent to a confession or creed or, um, church authority. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to admit it. The problem is many times Protestants don't admit it. They'll say, no, I'm just reading the Bible and it's obvious that this is Apocrypha and it's obvious The New Testament doesn't use it. And really what they're doing is they're assenting to a creed and then using the creed to be your filter of how you understand Scripture. So like I said, it's a legit way of looking at things, assenting to faith and in a particular authority. But be honest. Catholics and Orthodox, we're honest. We tell you, we follow the creeds, we follow the councils. We follow church authority. But if you don't, and you say, no, I'm just reading the Bible for what it is, no, you're not. Many times you're really sneaking in your own preconceived beliefs or what your church believes. You're just not admitting it. Okay, so let's go to commentaries. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't have commentaries for that section with Tobit. I'm sure they're there. I'm sure there's probably a ton of stuff. Because to me, if I could see it, guys, somebody else has to have seen it. Okay, so the verb that's translated here may convey the idea of a loan, which will be returned to God, Wisdom 15:8. So they see that. The same thing about the loan thing, that you'll be giving it back, your soul, get back to God. It's difficult to see Luke using an impersonal third person plural in place of the passive. The same idiom, i.e., the request for a return of the soul, is found in Wisdom 15:8, but with the passive form of the verb. So he's just saying whether it's active or passive, it's different. Okay, so Word Biblical Commentary asks the question, wherein lies his folly? In other words, why in Jesus' parable of the rich man, where's the folly of the rich man? What did he do wrong that was silly? Okay. He says different answers are given, and it gives various explanations by commentators. And it says, if Sirach 11:19-20 can be something of a guide, well, that's really interesting, right? This Deuterocanonical book being a guide for interpreting Jesus's words. Then the problem is likely to stem from the view that one's responsibilities in life end while securing one's own economic future. So basically, you're more concerned about securing your economic future than securing your salvation or a reward, right? Because this wouldn't be a salvation issue per se. It can be, but not per se. Okay, the conception of life soul as a loan that will be recalled is found in Wisdom 18:18 and close parallel. Notice it says it's a close parallel to Luke 12:20. So, Word Biblical Commentary. No, this isn't the Word Biblical Commentary. Another typo. Shame on me. This is the Dictionary of the Bible by Hastings. Okay, let's go to cross references. Like I said, I don't have that last one, but I do have the first two. Here we have Coverdale Bible 1535 has reciprocal cross references from Sirach 11 to Luke 12 and Luke 12 back to Sirach 11. We also have the Great Bible 1541 has a cross reference from Sirach to Luke and Luke back to Sirach. Taverner's Bible 1551 only has a cross reference in Sirach to Luke. Geneva New Testament has one from Luke 12 back to Sirach 11. The Bishop Bible 1568 has reciprocal cross references from Sirach to Luke and Luke to Sirach. You have the Geneva Bible 1583 from Sirach to Luke and Luke to Sirach. The Kingeth Jamoth Bible in 1611 original edition, you just have Sirach to Luke. You don't have Luke to Sirach. However, in later edition of King James Bible, like the Blaney edition 1769, as you can see, we do have reciprocal cross references. The later King James Conversion 1828 likewise has reciprocal cross references to these texts. Geneva Bible 1583 has a cross-reference from Wisdom 15:8 to Luke, but it doesn't have a reciprocal cross-reference. The King James has Wisdom 15:8 to Luke without having Luke to Wisdom 15:8. And Cambridge Paragraph Bible 1873, you have Wisdom to Luke, but not Luke to Wisdom. So you can see that the old Protestant Bibles, when they had these books in them, had cross references, and they saw these connections that we see, and they wanted their Protestant readers to know these connections. Why? Because it helps understand the biblical text, and without them, you kind of lose something, right? And that's why I do the channel, right? Because in a sense, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there in Protestantism that deceive others by bad information. They want to hide this information because it's quite frankly embarrassing. Although we're getting to the point now with everything being accessible online that they can't hide anywhere. And so now they got to admit that, yeah, early Protestants saw these connections. There are cross references in Protestant Bibles to these texts, showing an awareness that the New Testament did indeed utilize the Deuterocanon, the so-called Apocrypha. And that's why, guys, I believe the Protestant case for its Old Testament canon is in a state of collapse. We are fortunate today that we are at the point where they can't hide anymore. They can't deceive anymore because all this stuff is available on the internet. And which brings up this question here by the LaGloria Milton. I wish I could access those online. Not even Archive can help me, though. That's not true. All of this stuff I got online. So Archive has some of these old Bibles, and maybe you're not using the engine correctly. For example, I know for a fact there is the Cambridge Paragraph Bible, Coverdale Bible. It's hard to find on Archive the Blaney and Kahn editions of the King James Bible, but if you go in Google, put down Archive, I think King James, and then put the date for either of those, you might get a hit. It does take a little bit of searching, but you can find them. There's also an awesome website out there that has facsimiles of about a dozen Protestant Bibles. I forgot what it's called. But it's out there. I use that a lot. But it's all there. It's all on the internet. But you got to find where it is. I think on my Patreon account, I think I gave a list of links, but I'm not sure if I can look it up right now to help you. But it is out there. In fact, you know what? Maybe I can give you something right now. So, guys, talk among yourselves as I'm looking for this. By the way, I'll do my pre-programmed shout out for likes and stuff while I'm doing this. So, guys, if you like this program and things like it, please subscribe, hit the bell, and please support the ministry if you can. Help us to justify to our families why, instead of being up there with them, having fun, going on vacation and doing stuff, we're down in the basement putting together PowerPoints for you. If you can share the love, maybe become a member or support us on Patreon, we really appreciate it. Helps us justify to our families why we're doing this. But we'll do it no matter what. We love this stuff. And like I said, the one big pet peeve I have, the thing that triggers me, and not a lot of things trigger me, is when I see people being deceived, purposely deceived. Then that drives me nuts. I hate deception. And there's so much deception when it comes to the Old Testament canon issues between Catholics and Protestants. And the thing is, Protestants are misleading other Protestants in these areas. That's why we do the apocalypse. That's why it's called the Apocrypha apocalypse, because apocalypse means unveiling. In case you're wondering why we have such a terrible name for the channel. Apocalypse means to reveal, to unveil. And what we're doing here is we're unveiling and revealing the things about these books that other Protestants are trying to deceive their fellow brethren into not seeing. Yeah, so actually, here it is. I'll put it in the chat room for you. If anybody wants to check out some of these Bibles online, there's a really cool website. Sorry, I got to type this. It's hard to talk and type at the same time. I'm just going to give you the Coverdale. There we go. So here's the link, the Coverdale Bible, but it's bible-online.net. That doesn't have all the Bibles I give you, but it has a core group of English translations. And it's got the Coverdale, Matthew's, Great Bible, Tyndale, Matthew Tyndale, Taverners, Jugs, Tyndale, New Testament, Geneva 1557, New Testament, Bishops, Geneva 1583 Bible, King James 1611. They're all facsimiles, so you actually can flip through the pages virtually. It's an awesome website. So, so you can get that, or if you want the PowerPoints, if you want to support the ministry on Patreon, every chill stream, I try because apparently I missed one. I try to share all the PowerPoints that you see on the chill stream with my patrons. So you don't have to go spending hours flipping page by page, looking at cross references that are really hard to see. You could just use the PowerPoint to share with people. And by the way, I don't want it to be a paywall because I want this information to get out. So if you're not a patron, you can't afford it, that's perfectly fine. Appreciate your prayers instead. Actually, I want that more than your financial support. But just email me and I'll be glad to email you the slides for Chillstream. Just make sure you tell me which Chillstream, which text we're talking about. I'll be glad to send it to you free of charge as a PDF. And you can use it for Bible studies. You can use it for friends. You can use it however you want, I guess. You do it for your own personal study. So, yeah, there you go. Bill Gory Militant, thank you for that comment. Why does the wisdom always not get cross-referenced back to wisdom of the Gospels? That's interesting. I didn't notice that. I can't comment on it. I'll have to see whether what you say is true. A lot of things don't show up in the New Testament. Usually you'll find more cross-references in the so-called Apocrypha to the New Testament than you have the New Testament back to the so-called Apocrypha. So when you have a New Testament cross-reference, it seems like that's more rare than the other. And the reason for that may not be bias against the so-called Apocrypha. It could be that the New Testament footnotes or cross-references are usually quite lengthy for some Bibles. Okay. Guys, beware. This is one of those things that's out there. Maybe I should do a chill stream on cross-references. That would be fun. One of the excuses used by Protestant apologists, and I say excuses because it's not true. They will say, oh, well, yeah, we originally had cross-references to the so-called Apocrypha, but they had to be removed because the New Testament got so packed with so many cross-references that there just wasn't room. So we got rid of these secondary texts and just have proto-canonical cross-references. Now that may be true if you're getting to later editions of the King James Bible, okay, like the Blaney and the Kahn, those type of editions, yeah, it gets packed. And there are a few others, early Bibles that are packed with cross-references. That might be true, but by and large, there's plenty of marginal space. So that's not a really good excuse. Not every Bible was packed with cross-references. And even if it was, it's interesting that there still were cross-references. The reason why you don't have them is because the books were removed. Yeah, there are too many of them. If you look on that biblesonline.net, you look through those, you'll see lots of marginal space, by and large. Let's see, the Protestant might admit that these references, but it's not equal to expiration or authority. Yeah, they won't. And that's not why we're showing the cross references. I'm not showing the cross references because I'm insisting that they believed it was inspired. I'm just saying that these early Protestants who put these Bibles together believed it was important enough for Protestant readers to see the connections being made. So they saw these connections being made. And this blows, I'm using this because there is a line of argument or thought out there within Protestantism that the New Testament is entirely devoid of any kind of influence by the so-called Apocrypha. So there's no deuterocanonical influence. Therefore, there's no way these books could be considered inspired. And cross-references is a stellar way to show that's not true. Early Protestants knew these books were being utilized, that they're illuminative, they are important, and they got rid of them. Appearance, that's simple fact there. Get it in the finest, okay. Let me just go, if you have any questions or comments in the chat room, I'm doing the final call for questions before we close out the chill stream. Biblical commentaries, commentary. That one is a little bit more difficult. There are some online free Protestant commentaries. Probably BibleHub.com would be one of them. The problem is searching and finding these things is a lot more cumbersome. It takes a lot more time. If you own Logos or Verbum, that is a computer program you can buy. I've owned it. I actually owned Logos back when it was in its beta version. I actually have the floppy disk, if you remember what the floppy disk are, of Logos. I've been with them for years. It's a fantastic Bible system. You can purchase commentaries, and you could do searches on them and things like that. And so a lot of the commentaries that I find, especially those really short notifications, I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have Logos. So yeah, so commentaries free online, and doing this kind of research is very difficult. Logos is expensive though. So not the scriptures. Okay. Yes, you agree. Thank you. Yeah, actually, this is a comment about something else, but I agree. So we always appreciate more people coming here and learn, inquiring more info, instead of always rejecting something because it doesn't fit their ideologies. That's always preferable. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to catch up with the comments. Okay, let's see what this is. James has been given little gold nuggets today. I don't think all of the time, but I find Sirach, having from New Testament back to Sirach and other way around, but not really for wisdom. That, you've piqued my interest. You've piqued my interest. I'm going to have to start looking at that. I don't know if that squares with my experience. I'll have to look. I love cross references. I always get so much meat using all the cross references, especially now my Bible is bigger with 66 books. Yes. Yes. We are Bible thumpers. And the beautiful thing about being part of an apostolic church is you have more Bible to thump. Oh boy, floppy disk. Yeah, actually, I don't think it was actual was it 5.25? It was a 3.5 floppy, if you remember those. Yeah, I've been doing this a long time. Yeah, and spent a lot of money. I wish I could get all the money back from my logos, because those can be expensive, but I love them better than print books. You could utilize them better. It's easier to copy and paste when you're doing presentations. Logos is a pretty good platform. They've had some features though that as they're updating, they're getting rid of some old features. Unfortunately, I love some of the old features. So it's like I stopped updating it because I want to hang on to some of the utilities. The Ligori Militant says, what do you think of Wesley Huff? Have you any responses to him? He seems to be a hot topic amongst Protestant apologists. Actually, Sam Shamoon made some really good comments about Wesley Huff that I wish I could just repeat because uh, I thought Sam hit the nail on the head. The only reason any of us are hearing about Wesley Huff is because he knocked the tar out of, I don't know, a new ager, I guess you would, that was pretty prominent. And according to Sam, and I agree, I don't know much about the guy, but I guess this guy was kind of a sitting duck. All he needed was somebody that knew their stuff to knock him off his high horse. So it was a high profile figure. He had a debate with him. He knocked the tar out of him. That caught the feet of several evangelical streams. And all of a sudden, Wesley Huff is now a new sensation. But why? I mean, he did great in that debate because he prepared for it. But does that make him an expert on everything? No, he doesn't. I think he's articulate. I think he's well studied in some areas, especially textual criticism. He seems to know what he's talking about. But he loves to go outside of his wheelhouse. And whenever he talks about the canon, it's a train wreck. And yes, we have a couple of videos where we critique some of his stuff. His early stuff on the canon is horrendous. It's some of the worst stuff that I've seen out there. His latest one is a little better. So he's improving, but it's really not his wheelhouse. It's not. So, it's important. And Sam Samoon is absolutely right when it comes to this. Apologists need to stay in their lane, right? It's getting to the point where apologetic, back in the day in the 80s, early 90s, not 80s, early 90s, when I first started doing apologetics, you could be a general practitioner. You could cover all the areas, Marian doctrines, biblical stuff, canon, papacy, all the stuff. You have to handle all these fields. Now, as time is progressing, and I personally think that the Catholic Orthodox side is becoming muscular and, very robust. It's starting to become more and more specialized, right? And especially for academics, their field of expertise is very deep, but it's very narrow. So Wesley Huff is textual criticism. That's his narrow lane. And to go toe to toe with him on textual criticism, I couldn't handle it, right? I just don't have the expertise. I don't spend the time going line by line through the Textus Codex Vaticanus or something like that. But he does, right? So he would kick my behind if I ever got in a debate on something like that. But now, because he's popular, he's going to these other sites or other areas where he doesn't have the expertise. And when he does that, it's not good. It's not good at all. He's a young guy, and God willing, he'll learn that, maybe humble himself and stay in his lane. And if he did, I think he could serve the Lord. But he shouldn't dabble in canon issues. It's terrible. What do you guys, do you agree with me? Don't agree with me? Learning treasures here that I've never been taught. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Justified Janice, you rock. I'm glad to share this with you. Always learning something new here. Yep. And I learned new from you guys too, like the wisdom suppression in the New Testament. Let's see. Didn't see finance yet. Sorry, I don't want to highlight your private conversation. Sorry about that. Gary, like Ortland. See, Ortland's trying to be a general practitioner, and that's why he's catching so much flack from so many people. He really should stick to his expertise, but I'm not sure what his expertise is. He's just a pastor, I think. He does have a doctorate. I'm not sure what the doctorate's in. It's definitely not canonical studies, I can tell you that. Yeah, I knew Gavin Ortland. That's okay. Gavin Ortland's very articulate, and he comes off as a nice guy. But my opinion of him has been changing quite a bit. I think he's really an apologist. He's a Protestant apologist that wants to appear as if he's not. That he's just a guy with a doctorate who's open to stuff, and this is how he sees it. And it's funny that the way he treats primary text is appalling in some cases. And it's clear he's not being fair with them. Okay, yes, you're right. I think it was Billy Carson who was debated. That's right. Which Billy was crazy Gnostic. Yep, that's the guy. And yes, has no real knowledge, kind of know. Yep. No, he was smart. For debates, here's some advice for you. If you're ever going to debate somebody, you need to do the prep work. It's just like boxing. You can't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to go with a contender, right, and go toe-to-toe with them. You'll get nailed. You got to prepare. You got to train. You got to know their stuff. You got to know your stuff. You got to know the objections. You got to know the answers. You got to know the objections behind the objections. There's a lot of prep work involved. Very few people. I think William Albrecht, even he preps. And that's why he does well in debate. And so Huff did the right thing. He prepped for the Billy Carson debate, and he smoked him. He totally destroyed him in that debate. He showed him for what he is. But if you don't do the prep work, you're going to fall flat on your face, and they're going to clip you and make you an example. So, don't take on people unless you've done the research and you know your stuff in that area. Let's see. Ortland's experience in taking on church fathers out of context. Yeah, there was a channel that I forgot what it was. Maybe you guys can help me. But he took Ortland to task, like reading the context and showing how Gavin tended to be very selective in his reading of the early church fathers. And apparently he was taken down for copyright strikes for using Gavin's material. It's Protestant for 40 years. Yeah, well, welcome home. Apologist who doesn't think original language. Yeah. Well, you could be a competent apologist without knowing the ancient languages. The problem is people will appeal to them. That's why I started learning, because people will say, well, the Greek word says this. And, if you don't know Greek, you don't know if that's true or not. So if you want to get into apologetics professionally, you should at least know New Testament Greek. You don't need to know a lot of Hebrew. Latin's helpful as far as dogmatic things and early church fathers. So it's nice to know that, so you can read the Western fathers. New Testament Greek's very important. But Westhoff never debated a knowledgeable Catholic or Orthodox yet. I wonder if he ever will. That's a really good question. I wish he would. I'd debate him. I know a lot of Catholic apologists have pinged him asking to debate, but he says that his schedule is full. He doesn't have time, and that's fair. I know a lot of people will beat their chest and say, "Oh, he's scared. You run away." But You have to be fair to people. You have to be fair to people. It isn't necessarily scared. For example, for me, um, back when I debated James White, White was pinging me. Actually, his friend was pinging me to debate White again a couple of times. But we just fostered and adopted our children, and my house was chaos, and there was no way I could do the prep work, so I had to decline. So there was a time where, just couldn't do it. So, we need to extend charity to people. People are busy. Don't assume they're running. But if you're going to be in the public, if you're going to go live and put your views out like me, you do have to be prepared to interact with others that disagree with you. And I wish Huff would debate a knowledgeable Catholic, not some unknown, or at least knowledgeable in the area that they're debating. That would be a fun debate. I wish Gavin would too. He debated Horn, and Horn was knowledgeable, and it was a good debate. All right, guys, I think that's the end of the chill stream. So again, before we go, to show everybody that you survived and stayed awake through the chill stream, let's put Huff. How about that? We'll put Huff in the chat room. If you put Huff, you show it everybody. That's your trophy. You made it through the entire chill stream today. Good for you on that. By the way, for those who joined us who aren't familiar with the channel, please subscribe, like, hit the bell if you want this and other material. We're going to do a team stream, God willing, Friday, David and I. And hopefully, I think we had some great questions yesterday. We'll have some great questions Friday, God willing. Until next time, I am Gary Machuda, and have a great day. Bye-bye.